Welcome to Work Like a Human, a podcast from Go Innovation. Hey, welcome back to the Work Like a Human podcast. This is your host, Rory Tyer. I'm an executive coach and a facilitator, and this podcast is about exploring how we can be more human at work, which takes up such a high percentage of our time. My guest today is a friend and former coaching client, Brent Stutzman, who is a business owner. I coached him through a significant period of transition. And so today, the theme of this episode is going to be about what helps us get through transitions. And then Brent is also an incredible marketer. And so I'm hoping maybe he'll just share some of his secrets. But Brent, good afternoon. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So just to get started, give us a quick overview of your business. Like, tell us what it's called. Tell us what you do.
Yeah, so my business is called Brand Your Practice, and there's a lot of mental health professionals out there who spend an insane amount of money getting a graduate degree and going into a lot of times significant debt.
Yeah.
And then when they leave graduate school or their doctoral program, they didn't have one class on how to take those clinical skills that they just paid tens of thousands of dollars for and turn it into a brand and how to market that. Because at the end of the day, people shop for therapists, people shop for psychiatrists, just like they shop for Amazon. A lot of times they have poor websites. They actually don't communicate what they do clearly and how they actually help people. And so they struggle to get clients, or they actually just don't even want to open up their own private practice, where it can be a very fulfilling thing for some for therapists. So anyways, what I do is I help them. I come along, I take those clinical skills, I turn it to a brand, and I market that brand so they can expand the impact in the community that they live in, helping people. They grow their income and be more independent and have more autonomy. And it is a blast because at the same time, I'm actually extending my impact in the world and helping facilitate therapy appointments, like getting people the help when they need it. Because at the end of the day, they're going to go to Google, and you want therapists. The goal is for my clients to show up on Google when people need them.
Yep.
So, and once they do show up, they click on the website and it's like, yeah, this therapist is for me. So that's kind of what do I do at the end of the day. I started out really broad in my marketing, and now I'm like super niche down. So it's great. I love it.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is one of those seemingly paradoxical marketing maxims that I keep running into, right? Like, our impulse is to try and offer what we do to anybody who wants it because we want clients, we want to make money. And I think what you have found is that the narrower you niche, you actually increase your effectiveness and you increase the likelihood of bringing in people who are outside that niche. Oddly enough, it's a little bit weird how that happens. If you're listening to this and not watching, I'm smiling really big because I can remember, and I should say in advance, you have given me permission to bring this up. So coaching is a confidential relationship. I don't just go around telling people that I've coached with somebody. You gave me permission to talk about this. I remember when, as part of our coaching, you were trying to work through what is the vision for what I want to do. And I remember being so proud of how you were able to draw the line from your marketing work to this impact of being able to bridge the gap between people and the therapist that they need in their moment of need. And so if you're able to be found and if it's easy to see what you do, then people are more likely to book an appointment that might save their life. So
Right.
So for this episode, one of the main things I want to focus on for people is, what are some of the benefits of coaching, and in particular, coaching through transition. And this is really not about me or stroking my ego. This is because as a coach, I'm honestly more successful if it's less about me and more about the person I'm coaching and about the methodologies I use that have very little to do with me and my personality, but more to do with just what good coaching should be. So I wonder, Brent, if we could start, if you could cast your mind back, because we had an initial conversation where, and this is very common, people are like, I'm not even sure if I know what coaching is or if I need it. Is this really, and I wonder, could you cast your mind back there and talk about where were you at that time?
Yeah. Well, you reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, hey, I'd love to reconnect. And I said, let's reconnect. And then we had
it was about video stuff, I think. Because I saw you doing some really good video stuff, and I was like, I've got to ask him what equipment he uses. That's right.
That's right. And so we were able to reconnect and catch up. And I think I just shared, yeah, man, I'm in this point where I think I need to transition out of my job. So just to kind of give your audience some context, I was a pastor, a music pastor, but was in ministry full time for I think about 15 years leading up to that, and at one church for 12 years. So you can imagine the deep relationships that one can form. As a pastor, you just know everybody. You baptize their kids. Uh,
Oh yeah, you're a
you
fixture.
yeah, you
Yeah.
just know everybody. And um, but when I started a side hustle, this marketing to actually help my wife's private practice grow, I learned these set of skills that
Hmm.
actually a lot of private practices need, and when it comes to marketing and branding, and it just grew. And I just loved it. It got me
Yeah.
into the marketplace out of kind of church world, which I loved. I loved it. I loved what I did, but it was something different. And
Hmm.
I sensed that there was a change coming. And I had no idea, because what a lot of the change meant was like, um, I knew relationships were going to change. Deep
Yeah.
relationships had
Yeah.
to change out of it. So I was fearful. I was absolutely confused. I actually didn't even know how to have these conversations, although I needed to have it because my relationship with my wife, it was starting to get a burden for her. We were burnt
Yeah.
out. We were doing so
Yeah.
much stuff. We had young kids. Like, it's so a change needed to happen.
Yeah.
And you just reached out. You reached out to me to ask about video equipment at a very vulnerable time in my life. And I was like, well, maybe Rory, you can actually help me. So that's how it all started.
Yeah. So it's interesting as I hear you recounting, and I'm remembering some of these conversations. Like, when I work with people in transition, the first thing that I want to talk to them about is what are the circumstances that can no longer remain the same as they have been.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just related some of those, right? So this is the why. Like, what is motivating the urgency for change, and even the question of how urgent is change really. And I remember you describing to me, it just had felt like things were building. And, the way I've heard you put it before is like, you just reached a point where you knew it cannot stay the same. Like, something's got to give.
Yeah.
And so, I wonder, before we talk too much about what the process felt like for you, I don't remember how long, like, was it 8 months, 7 months? Over when the duration of our coaching relationship? Because like typically it would be 5 months if it was every other week, but I think we had to span a few
Yeah,
gaps.
it had to be 6 or 7 months, because
Yeah.
if anything knows about church world, everything takes forever. And I actually had to have several conversations in
Yeah.
a very delicate sequential order,
Yeah.
from leadership, which we had to keep quiet. It was like, and then
Right.
slowly rolling out to close friends, and then to the music team, and then to the entire congregation. And all those conversations need to be nuanced. And so you were really kind of coaching me through a lot of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, because it wasn't entirely clear. Like in some cases, there was somewhat of an order because the church, the particular church community you're part of, had somewhat of a hierarchy outside of the church itself. Which, if you're listening to this and you're not part of church world in any capacity, some churches like my church are just totally independent, and there is no top sort of above the staff of that church. Other churches are part of like denominational authority networks, and so in your case that was the case. But then in some of these other cases, there were a lot of decisions to be made about like, when do I say what to whom, and how do I decide? And that I remember at certain points that just felt like a huge burden to you, like the
Yeah.
mental energy required to,
Yeah.
because you just didn't have that much margin between parenting and a job and a half, and being married and being invested in your spouse and in the success of her business. So not just married, but married to somebody who also was pretty active. So like, I wonder if we could jump ahead though, sort of to the
Mhm.
end of our coaching series. How would you describe your mindset at that point?
Well, there's a tremendous amount of relief, because I felt like I did it well, with your help. I mean, at the end of the day, I made a video to kind of like the big announcement.
Yeah.
Um, and then I stood up in the congregation too. So there were some things that I did. It was almost like a final project. Like, it's like a
Well, and so
thesis.
we
Like,
should
there's
say, I
so
guess the
much.
result is like you stepped down from your position
Mhm.
and you felt good about the way you stepped down. And then
Yeah.
you stepped full time into the world of brand your practice. So being a full-time
Mhm.
business owner, entrepreneur, and that was the transition. Yeah.
That's right. And then I had to grow that. Like, so, but there's also like, so there's so many relationships at the same time,
Yeah.
because so like I had my own staffers and contractors I was working with, and then
Yep.
clients. So yeah, there's a lot. So I think, at the end of the day, I'm glad I did it. It was a great process. It was a hard process. It really needed to happen. And, you know, in God's providence, actually, it needed to happen because COVID hit not too long, like a year and a half later.
Yeah.
And the amount of mental health support that our world needed,
Yeah.
was just incredible. So really preparing those clients to receive just an onslaught of new leads and intakes, because marriages and children,
Yeah. Yeah.
teenagers. I mean, they just needed so much help. And so being able to help facilitate that. So it's kind of
Yeah.
providential in that way too. Now that I'm thinking about and looking back, it was really important.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about it from that perspective. How would you, like as an example, at the beginning of our conversations, I remember a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fuzziness, which is totally common at the outset of a huge transition because you can't predict the future. It's scary. Some of it is convincing yourself that you really do want to make the change. What are some words that you would use to describe your mindset by the time you got to the end of our process? Like, how had coaching affected your mindset by that point?
Well, I had I ended up getting a lot of clarity around what I wanted the good life to be a bit more.
That's
right. So
I remember those conversations. Yeah.
We wrote them down. I actually remember the one like just spending more time with kids.
Yeah.
And ironically, I did because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
But so like, think about it though, like I am now my own boss, and I could set my own schedule, and which allowed a tremendous amount of flexibility as we were navigating homeschooling. Susan's business got very busy.
Yeah.
There's just so many things. I just remember there was spending time with kids. I remember it was like more potential earned income.
Yep.
Because of running my own business and being able to live in the Chicago suburbs was a big important thing. And so we've been able to do that. In fact, we bought an old house and we've had to do some significant plumbing issues. So like it's not just living in it's like being able to afford all those things. So having our own business, having my own business we've been able to do that. So those were some big goals. The reason why I needed to make that transition. I mean, there's some other things too, just burnout, which is very common in ministry. So yeah.
So I wonder, like, I think there's probably people listening who are in like a full-time job and have maybe thought about going into business for themselves for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, right? The flexibility, the ability to be there for the people that matter, a much higher financial ceiling potentially, right? Than if you're just in a salary job. What is some advice you would have for somebody who's considering making the entrepreneurial jump, but is hesitant?
Yeah. Great question. So I would say the number one thing is to be very clear in how you communicate the problem that you solve for your clients. People will pay you to solve pain points. So to get very clear on that problem that you solve, that would be, I would think, the most important thing. And because from there is your, everything you can market. So I say this to clients all the time. And this is like really talking about your brand message, your message. Yeah. So no Hollywood movie is ever made without a script. They always start with the script. And from that script, then they make a blockbuster. They hire the actors, set design, color, whatever it is. They build it out. But you can't build a Hollywood movie, a good one, if you don't have a script. Same thing goes with your business. You got to have that brand message down. What is that script? And then you can build the website, business cards, logo, all that stuff. So get very clear on that brand message.
Yeah. And of course that leads into being clear about like, who is it that you actually serve, right? So if you're clear on the problem, that means you got to be clear, well, who has that problem and what are they looking for to solve it? And can you articulate that in a way that makes them trust you to be the guide, right?
That's right.
And you and I, we know some of the same language of the story brand universe and stuff. And I should say you're also a certified story brand guide.
That's right.
Which is pretty cool. Seems like a pretty cool community of marketers.
It is. They're really good. Like they're good marketers. I'm not talking about myself, but like these guys, they're like, the more I get to know them.
I'm one of them, but those people are really good.
they're super hungry and they're like really kind because the marketing world can be pretty ugly. And so they're just kind, honest people, and it's a good community for that. So,
well, okay. And so I hear like a meta level piece of advice though, even behind that. And what I hear you saying is, if you want to step into doing something for yourself entrepreneurially, you need to be prepared to really treat it like a business. Like it's not a passion project. It needs to be a business. And this is the foundation for that book, E-Myth, that a lot of people
Mm.
go into business for themselves because of a passion and end up becoming incredibly burned out because they don't realize that nobody trained them how to treat it like a business. And the kind of thing you're describing in terms of getting clear on the problem you solve and articulating that brand script, that is in that bucket, right? Of treating it like a business. What else would you add along those lines?
I guess if you're starting out, I would just, you could be really passionate about playing the guitar, but then you get into a band and you may not like it. so what I would say is do some free work at the beginning and just see, like, you might be passionate about website building, but you actually may hate working for people.
Doing it for clients, having to go through the rounds of feedback. Yeah.
That's right. So what I would do is just, I would do a couple free projects, and this is what you can do. You get experience out of that. And then you can ask for reviews or testimonials that you can then be like, okay, I am ready to do this. I want my LinkedIn endorsements. Can you give those to me? And you can start build that out. But before you just jump head into it, just find a way to test it out first.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's good advice too.
Thanks so much for listening to Work Like a Human. We will return after a quick break.
A lot of us are using Zoom for a lot of reasons right now. To connect with friends and family, for our work, and a lot of people I've talked to, we're sort of like dragged into it kicking and screaming. Zoom fatigue, the Google searches for that just shot up. So what's the problem? Well, Zoom can be frustrating to use if you haven't taken the time to learn it. I can't figure out how to get people to talk to each other. They talk over each other. I have created a course called Using Zoom Effectively that will teach you everything you need to know about how to get the most out of Zoom. Take what you used to do in person and put it on Zoom, because the truth is, Zoom allows you to work with anyone, anywhere, from anywhere. If you ask me, that's a pretty incredible opportunity. So do yourself a favor, videos and some PDFs, and become part of a cohort where you have Q&A with me. You'll experience Zoom meetings that I facilitate, and we'll walk through exactly how this works. Be equipped with everything you could possibly need to know to use Zoom effectively. Visit usingzoomeffectively.com. This is for anybody that works with other people in any capacity over Zoom on a regular basis. You will benefit from this course. Usingzoomeffectively.com. What about just the idea of thriving in transition in general? Because that is applicable to a ton of people, regardless of whether you are an entrepreneur or have ever thought about it, right? What have you found helpful to help strengthen you through transition?
Oh man, just talking to people, honestly. I'm an Enneagram 6, so that means my friend tells me, you're really anxious, Brent. And I think I was like, yeah, and I'm like scratching my hand like now, like, yeah, I probably am a pretty anxious person.
What are you talking about? I don't
know. But what I do is, like, I plan for the apocalypse in every situation.
Oh goodness.
So what that meant is I ended up having to I talked to a lot of people about how they did it. And I was also just very open. I had to be very vulnerable with people in leadership over me as I was transitioning out, and trusting them with this information as well. And that worked out really well, I thought. And so a lot of it, thriving in transition is actually, I think, you need other humans around you to help you do it. Because there's going to be people who give you advice, and then there's also the people like you who can coach, and there's also people who can provide empathetic listening and not try to solve your problems. So but here's the thing is those, like, most people don't have those people in their network. So I think at the end of the day, you should always be building your network. Who are those trusted people? Because you never know when you're really going to need them for a big transition.
If I remember correctly, you didn't know a whole lot about coaching, before we started talking. And that's a lot of what I think we did initially was I tried to help you just experience it. And so, like, that's how I do business development as a coach, essentially, is I give someone a free conversation. And my goal is you walk away with this conversation with some valuable clarity, whether or not we end up actually working together. But I wonder, like, what did you learn? I'm not the end all be all of coaching, but I wonder, through the lens of working with me, what did you learn about coaching and about the benefits of coaching?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because since I worked with a lot of therapists, I knew there's a difference.
Yep.
The one thing that I think therapists and coaches do that good ones do is ask good questions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so what you were doing is you were prodding a lot of the why questions.
Yeah.
And I realized I didn't have the answers to those questions. And so that's what I needed. Because so like a good mission statement will get you through some really hard times. understanding your why to the transition is going to get you through that dip that you never are going to go to as people might turn their backs on you, or there's threatened, I don't know, something like that. There's going to be friction in that transition. So for you to help me get to the why was so important, because I needed that in order to push through, because it was endless hard conversations.
I remember it being exhausting for you, because it's not just the conversation. That takes up a lot of time and energy in itself, but there's preparing for it and anticipating it, and then potentially dealing with ramifications of it or additional conversations. Some of these are with individuals, some of these are with groups, and it was spaced out over a decent amount of time.
That's right. Yeah. So understanding the why, the coaching showed I needed to understand better the why behind this transition. I knew I needed a transition, but I needed to know and clarify the why. And I think that's what you really helped me to do, even in that first initial consultation coaching session.
Yeah. And I wonder if you could say something, because another memory I have from our coaching is that you discovered that an integrative approach to coaching was helpful for you, where so you mentioned the therapists and coaches are different, and I'm very clear with people. I'm not a therapist. I have helped people realize that they need to go talk to therapists for the first time through my coaching, which I'm very proud of. But aside from boundaries like that, the boundaries of coaching are up to the person being coached. So if you didn't want to talk about your spiritual life, or if you didn't want to talk about your marriage, that's totally fine. I think you found it helpful to try to integrate those things. And I wonder if you could say something about that, because I think there's a temptation, especially for maybe executives or professionals, to try to laser focus coaching on a very specific thing, when in my experience, my bias is that it's all sort of interconnected, and it probably all should be fair game in some capacity. So I wonder if you could say something about that.
Yeah. And let me just say, the coaching actually ended up becoming therapeutic for me in ways. Well, because I'm married to a therapist, so that has its own complications, because she can see right through it. But you allowed me to think, okay, so what is Susan's role in this? What is her perception of things that are going on? And it was crazy, because it was sort of Susan's been wanting me to tell me these things. You know what? She probably was, and I wasn't listening very well. But bringing her in the midst of that transition. Because here's the thing, especially in church world, you have dual and triple relationships, where it's I'm an ordained pastor and I'm married. I have a wife, and so there's I'm kind of pastoring her, but she's my wife and she's my mom. So there's all these levels. And so actually what happened was, in the midst of the transition, I would forget to bring Susan along at a critical point. And so what you were helping me do is okay, so what does that look like to bring her along in this next stage in the transition? So you were helping me keep those really, really important relationships on the forefront, and helping me think multidimensional in my relationships.
And so that brings up a really good point. When I teach on leadership, I talk about the change curve, right? And so in simple terms, it's just you start here, and then it goes down here, and then it comes up here. And if you're the one architecting or anticipating the change, mentally you go through that curve and you feel the benefits that are going to happen on their side. And that's a lot of the purpose of your why, is it helps you stay focused on what's the better future that you're trying to build. The problem is, and this happens in organizations all the time, the decision makers get there and they forget that others who are going to be sort of handed a decision are not there. And that produces this, then the gulf feels very real. It's not just the natural gulf of change. It's, well, we're still here and you're over here and you didn't take the time to even communicate. And so that's a huge principle for change, is who are the stakeholders, to use a very sterile word for your wife, but who are the people who really need to be brought along and part of this decision, and in what order and what capacity, because otherwise you get there before they get there, and then it just gets messier. I did this. When I was vice president of marketing in a nonprofit, I got so far down the path of implementing a new finance and donation system without consulting the finance team. So by the time I'm telling you, Brent, it was one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made. And it resulted in a lot of unnecessary frustration that could have been avoided if I had just gotten their buy-in early on and allowed them to help architect in their terms the future they wanted, because they did want the same things I did. I just didn't take the time. So anyways, thanks for saying that, because it made me remember that stupid thing I did.
Yeah. Well, honestly, that change conversation, that was worth every penny of investment, I should say dollars, hundreds, of investment in coaching, because, okay. So for your listeners, the change, it's incredible. So like what you're saying, I already know the why. I know where I'm going, and I'm kind of almost there. And what happens is, like, it feels good, and and like I'm smiling a bit more. But the people behind me, who I just dropped a bomb on, that I'm stepping down, are sad, and they're like, I would imagine, like, why are you smiling? And it's like,
Right.
why are you?
We don't feel very good.
We don't feel very good about this at all.
Yeah.
So what that allowed me to do, and I literally saw the change happen in real time in different conversations. So what that allowed me to do is to actually stay in that moment with them. So I had to be very much aware of where they were on that change curve. And if I needed to be more empathetic and more present and sad with them, I had to do that. And then there are some people who are on the other aspects, like my wife or someone else at, other areas of leadership. I could pivot and I could be more frank. It just changed, like the change curve changed everything, and how I related to others.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it was crazy to see it happen in real time. It really, but it was probably the most helpful tool you gave me.
I'm encouraged to hear that. Okay, well, so let's switch gears for a moment, because I do also want to talk about, the theme of this podcast is work like a human. And something that has already arisen in this conversation is that humans experience change. It has a deep impact, and we experience it differently at different speeds, and we have different preferences. And so there are ways that we can help others come along in that. But I wonder, for you, as you think about your work and how differently you feel about it now than you felt when we first started coaching together, what does working like a human mean to you?
I take a very high, like, kind of theological view of work.
Yeah.
And what it comes down to, work provides dignity. So, like, being able to work with your hands and earn a living to be able to provide for your family or yourself or whatever it might be, there's so much dignity wrapped up in that.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about, one of the things that the pandemic robbed many people of was the dignity of work. The thing that's actually made me think differently about work is how I treat others in the work that I give them, and the kindness that I can give to them in the work. So the way I think, like, I have to do my best not to view people as a means to an end, right? They have their own dignity, and the work that they do for me has its own dignity, and to be very careful with that. And so, and I'm just always hyper aware about how people think about me anyways. Like, I'm very concerned about that type of thing.
Do we need to have a coaching conversation, Brent? Is that what this is going to turn into?
Probably. And so, I guess, I don't know if that's helpful, but I've just been thinking a lot about the dignity of work that it gives to people. And so there's a part of me where it's like, I'm giving you work to do, but not viewing as like clock in your hours, or something like that. Like, it's because I think of that, that's a new thing that I'm learning as a business owner. So I don't know if that helps at all. But,
well, and this reminds me, I think at near the end of the close of our coaching relationship, you were like about to hire or had just hired your first employee. You just told me you have a handful now. And so, and that was your first experience having a direct report in that way. And I remember talking to you, you were like, I really want to set this person up for success. I want to be a good boss. Like, I think you were navigating some of the tension of like, I want to like be there for whatever conversations this person needs to have, but also it's work. So like, how do I put those boundaries? So I think when you think about working like a human, you have a good perspective on it, because it's not just pursuing that for yourself. You're making a certain kind of work possible for others. And because I know you've talked about wanting that work to be meaningful, well compensated, exciting. You want it to be like a healthy place to work. What else do you think about when you think about how the kind of working environment you want to create for the people that work with you?
So it's not so much the environment. I've actually been thinking a lot about gift giving. Not just to my clients, but to my employees. Okay. And to my contractors. comes from a book that I read called Giftology by John Ruhlin. And he was saying that if you want your employees to be generous and kind and attentive to detail in some ways, he's like, they need to experience that from you first. And so I was like, huh. And he said gift giving is this really wonderful way to do that, because I give gifts to my clients, but it's also really important to give gifts to what gifts actually say, I see you. Now, these aren't just like a fruit basket, right? So he's going deeper. He's like, go really
Meaningful
deep.
gifts.
So yeah. So like there's someone on my team who's empathic. So just like a high sensory. Yeah. And so as a thank you gift, I think it was even a little around Christmas time, I just bought like the coziest, thickest, like blanket for winter time, like just like very tactile, you know. Another one was really into knives. And so I didn't know anything about knives, but these are like kind of like tactical knives. And he was like, we're talking about it. So I asked him some more. I was like, maybe this is something I could give him. And so I didn't know anything about knives. So I emailed my friend out in Montana, who's like as mountainous as you can get. And I was like, what knife could you get? And he's like, get a Benchmade knife. And I was like, all right. So I did it. And like, it was probably one of the most fun gift giving moments, because he opened it. He's like, I never thought I would be able to own one of these before.
Wow.
And he was just like, and I got it engraved. Like I just went out and just said, thank you so much, because you have helped me grow my business and in such meaningful ways. And you are there. And I said something like in a note, I said, like a good knife, you're always there to get me out of trouble if I need, something like that. Like I'm trying to make the connection. It sounds a little cheesy, but I tell you,
it's really super thoughtful. I'm like legit. I'm genuinely impressed. I mean, that's awesome. Yeah.
So that's kind of how I'm viewing this, like work and human, and as a boss, like what kind of environment I want to create. So, I don't know if that's helpful, but gift giving to your employees and contractors, just to see that you let them know you see them and you value them is I think is a new thing I've been doing for the last couple of months. And I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, and just appreciation and affirming feedback in general, regardless of whether you're a business owner, there's people around you that you could probably make an intentional effort to notice more often and catch. We talk about catching people doing things right.
Yes.
Like when we teach on feedback, most people's mental model of feedback is performance review. It's infrequent. And if it does come, it's me being corrected in some capacity, which correction can be super important. But if you have a habit of catching people doing things right, and then occasionally you also offer them corrective feedback, the trust is just going to be so much deeper. Like they'll trust that you're a genuinely appreciative person and that you're not only seeing them do things wrong, right? So what you're talking about is taking that to the next level in such an intentional way, which I really appreciate. And you said the book was called Giftology. I feel like I've heard of that before, and now I'm going to maybe add that to my list.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's a short read.
It's interesting, this between you and I, we both actually, I think, spend a lot of time helping people clarify like what it is they really want to do and why that matters, right? You from the perspective of using a story brand framework and some other tools for the purpose of getting clarity about their business. And then obviously me from like a coaching perspective. But I think there's some principles that are in common. I wonder if someone's listening and they're thinking like, I'd really like to be clear on what I want to do, or maybe I even have a business idea. What are some of the first steps you recommend to help people move toward that clarity?
So that's a great question. I'm going to steal from StoryBrand a little bit here. And also because I do it myself, is if you have an idea, wireframe a homepage for it. So get it down on paper. How would you actually sell this idea? How would you even pitch it to your spouse if you wanted to? Like it's really getting clear around that message side. So I'll get a piece of paper out and just start building out, because I have a formula in how I build my websites, the StoryBrand formula, and I just start writing some stuff down. Like, what are those words?
Yeah.
I guess, man, I'm just saying the same thing over again, but words matter.
Yeah, they do.
And how you say them matters.
Yep.
And how clear you can say them, it matters even more. So the more clarity you can kind of get it down, the better it's going to set you up.
And there's stuff that brings that clarity, right? Like I think you mentioned before in a different context, talking about having a community around you, workshopping your ideas with people that you trust, and maybe even with people that you don't know and that don't have a reason to only say kind things to you, right? Getting
Right.
some of that. And a lot of times, especially if it's like a product or a course, the best thing you can do is just iterate, just get it out there and figure out, from there. But I like what you're talking about. I mean, you're essentially saying, look, let's imagine what this would look like as a landing page, as a sales page, as a whatever. How are people going to encounter it? Yeah, I just wonder, Brent, as we approach the end of the conversation, like other lessons that you've learned about work, about transition, anything in the above at this point in your like entrepreneurial journey.
Dude, there's so much. And it's all really good things because I didn't go to business school. So honestly, like the story brand community does provide a lot of, there's people who've gone before and there's new people in the marketing world. It's having those mentors. Like, so if you don't have people in your life that you can call and ask for help, maybe you need to hire somebody like a coach, right? Like you just have to buy it. And that's
I've been
okay
resisting
too.
saying it, but yes, you
know
should
what I
hire
mean?
me as your coach. That's what
Absolutely.
you listener right now. This is your sign. If you've been waiting for it, you need a coach.
I'll say this is the entrepreneurial side of things. And I guess this goes back to work and giving people work too. My next project, I was sharing this before we started recording, is to go on vacation for 4 weeks. This is an idea from Clockwork, Michael Michalowicz, to clear your 4-week vacation. And sweet Christmas. It's like this pandemic, like nobody's rested. Nobody has been rested. Even if you've been out of work, you're at home, nobody's rested out of this. And I'm like, we just need to unplug a little bit. So, but in order to do that, you're putting your systems in place. What is the product that you offer? How are you going to get that product to your client? Write everything down. We have Trello cards like crazy. We're using Notion to do it all. Like we're just data dumping. And then you leave, and then you let things break, and then you let your team fix it, and you come back, and how is it better? And you're going to be a better boss. You're going to be more trusting of your employees and contractors to get the work done. And I just imagine I'm going to come back somewhat rested because I have kids, and then and set up for just this really beautiful, let's move forward and grow a little bit more. I just think that's what needs to happen. But that's 3 years into it. That's 3 years into us. Otherwise, you are the bottleneck, and you won't do good work, and the people who work for you will hate you, and you will drive them crazy. So, I see it as a necessary kind of evolution of that.
That's just so important. Like I've coached a lot of people who struggle to move past that founder whose hands are in everything stage. But your business cannot scale. Like you just will not achieve the life that you hoped to achieve through your business if you are the person you must have your hands in everything. So getting trusted people, automating, using good systems and good tools, and on a more fundamental mindset level, allowing yourself to give others the freedom to fail, allowing for, getting your mindset in the stage of like, okay, I don't have to be in control of this all the time. Because if you don't let it go now, it's just going to get harder and harder. But I commend you. I mean, some people take 7 to 10 years to get to the point where they feel like they can do this kind of experiment. So I'm interested to follow up with you once. What's a time frame for that, by the way? So I can like try to hold you accountable to this.
That'd be great. Yeah. This June, I'm going to just, I'll have just a couple client calls, but I'm not going to be doing the work other than just passing it off. And then
so a couple months from now at the time of this recording. So this is exciting, man.
Yeah. It's honestly, it's all about trying to trust people. But you also have to let people fail and let them do it on. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but that's part of it. I was like, this is my baby, and I'm giving parts of that baby away to let other people nurture it. So,
but it's so necessary. I mean, you just can't get where you want to go without doing that. So, all right. So as we're winding down, for those of you listening or watching, got a couple of questions for you to reflect on. So first, think about the transition that you may be in right now. I think everyone is in some kind of transition. And, there's a 4-part framework that we use to help people articulate a change story. And I would encourage you to have your change story, because if you have it, it will give you strength. And the first part is why. So what are the circumstances that have driven you to the point of needing to make a change? What are those circumstances that can't remain the same? The next part is what, and this is, can you give me the single sentence of the change that you would like to make? Give me the newspaper headline, the tweet, the short summary. And then the next step is how. Can you give me at least 3 steps? Is it a timeline? Is it 3 major buckets of things that need to happen? This is the how will that work? And then the what if and the so what. This is that vision of the better future that you see around the corner if you can navigate this well. And maybe the flip side of that is the worst future that you're avoiding, that you can remind yourself, I don't want that outcome. I want this better outcome. So that's that why, what, how, what if. It's an adult learning framework that also serves to articulate a change story. So if you're listening to this, my challenge is think about a change you're going through and put it in those terms. Articulate the why, the what, the how, and the what if. And then number 2 would be, what support do you need? Spend some time in reflection, figuring out what support do I need in this change? Who can I ask for that support? Because that is going to make the change so much easier for you and for those around you. So man, Brent, thank you for taking some time to talk about transitions, to be transparent and vulnerable about your coaching. I really appreciate that you agreed to talk about that, because coaching is confidential. I want to make sure I reiterate that. I don't just go talking about the fact that I've coached people, but you agreed. And I just, you were a joy to work with. You were a joy to have as a friend. I respect you as a business owner so much. And so I'm looking forward to seeing the results of your REST experiment in a few months. I'm going to be following back up with you. But thanks for spending some time with us today.
Well, you are welcome. I hope your listeners found some hope and some encouragement out of this conversation.
I'm sure they did. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.